I've always thought that fact is stranger than fiction. What you see or what you find or you discover is always more interesting than what you invent, really. A strong commitment to a subject matter is important because I think that if it is there, hopefully it will find its own way of expressing itself. I think very often what happens with painting, and I'm sure in all art forms, is that people take an approach and they put it onto something, and indeed my own training was bound up with that. You didn't really matter what you painted, but what mattered was how you painted. And so you'd pick up an expressionist way of working or an impressionist way of working and just superimpose it on something. That was fine, but the trouble is it was always somebody else's gestures, not my own. Now, if one gets immersed in the subject matter, the tower blocks or the French landscapes, closely enough, hopefully that will evolve a way of working which hasn't been done before. A portrait of somebody sitting in the middle of a canvas with a head in the middle is, I suppose, an internalized painting where everything tends to go inwards to a center point. Landscape tends to imply the opposite. Everything goes out, and I think I've always been drawn to that aspect of a painting, that something goes out beyond its literal limitations of itself. I've always painted the view, I suppose, where I live. So living in a town or cities, you find yourself painting what the cities are composed of. I tend to build a body of work around a particular housing estate, and so that obviously becomes a kind of consuming interest for 2 or 3 years, and you get to know the place, and you collect information about it and so on. But the information I collect is entirely visual. I don't want to get involved in the kind of social aspect of it at all. That's another reason, in a way, that I make a point of calling them landscapes or housescapes, if you like. I want to put my position in terms of being one of a viewer who's simply looking and finding a landscape. A lot of eyebrows have been raised in terms of why I do them, and what's the point of doing them. You paint ugly things, and why I paint ugly things, things with a bad reputation and all that stuff. And I see them as quite impressive things. Ugly or beautiful doesn't really come into it. I just think it's an impressive part of the landscape. Painting on a foreign sort of surface like the concrete liberated me to a certain extent in terms of what I would allow myself to do or not do. And certainly using graffiti did that. There were two things going on. One was what you might call the art of the real, the concrete, the graffiti. So there's a kind of conversation going on between the illusionism of the painting on the one hand and the introduction of real materials and marks, which was the exact opposite of the illusionistic painting. One would almost seem to contradict the other. There's always been this time in the summer when we've gone to France. We spend more time down there. I've had more time to paint down there. And I simply paint because we are down there. It bears out the landscape approach that I have to painting. I think probably the French paintings will be inevitably seen as being much more traditional, and because they're paintings of a picturesque landscape painted in an entirely conventional way, really. Hopefully they'll be seen differently within the context of the London pictures, which are also painted very conventionally. I mean, the way I go about painting, the nuts and bolts of the actual making of the paintings is the same. I don't ask myself what it is I look for, but if one's drawn to choosing a particular subject or view or whatever you call it, which happens on a completely subconscious level probably, there will be elements which are similar. But I don't mind that because I see the French paintings almost as a kind of antidote to what I do here. In some respects, an artist with the sort of approach that I have is always trying to make things more real. When I started using the concrete as a base on the London pictures, Same sort of time I started using the earth or the sand in and on the French paintings. I suppose in both cases there's a strong emphasis of the material quality, the physical material quality of what seems relevant to the subject matter. But up until 5 years ago, I just thought, well, I'm just another painter, you know, every other person's a painter around here. And I've never said it before to anybody, but only fairly recently have I really felt that that what I'm doing will kind of last. I have a very old-fashioned idea about what artists should do, but I think that if a visual artist, as we're talking about that, can open people's eyes to maybe seeing something differently, then that's the job, really.